Speedy World. I am SYED SHABAHAT and you are watching Fault Lines. 2.2 million people are still stuck in Gaza, the city that has become a problem for the entire world, a city which has faced one of the worst wraths of war by the state of Israel. The last count of the deaths had surpassed 12,000, and after that, the communication was again choked by Israel. The only functional hospital was encircled by Israeli military. People of Gaza are starved to death. No water, no food, no electricity, no internet connection. The only water available is either from the sea or from the sewage. And still, the United Nations, the United States and allies are not calling it an act of genocide. Yes, they're still calling it a war, despite the fact that Hamas has not been able to do any serious damage to Israel, at least during last 26 days. But this unilateral act of aggression is named war, not genocide. Interestingly, according to the website of United Nations, there is a definition of genocide that is available, and I'll request my producer to flash it for you. This textbook definition of genocide says that it's an act where killing member of a group is taking place, which in case of Gaza has surpassed 12,000. It's causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of a particular group. And let me tell you here, since October 9, no water, no food, no electricity, not even fuel has been allowed in. It further says, deliberate infliction on group's condition of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in parts. And at this point, I would like to tell you 42% housing units of the city have been destroyed according to the UN's count. Imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the group. 50,000 women are pregnant in Gaza. 160 births are expected every day in a city which 21 hospitals are dysfunctioning, and the 22nd one is surrounded by the army of Israel. On this very pertinent issue, my first guest in the show is Inam Sahri. He is a retired bureaucrat. He's a senior analyst, also author of a book that he has written about the issue of Palestine, that is not only a historic account but also a collection of his own memories when he was traveling to the land of Palestine. Inam Sahri Sabha, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Being author of this book, help us to understand the historic background of the problem that is burning in the city of Gaza today.
Thank you very much, sir. The problem has started, as everybody knows in the world, every student knows, scholars know. The problem really started with the Zionist movement that started in 1897. And then it was transferred into a movement, an organization properly into, you can say, 1901.
1901.
That was 1901. But the real problem started after World War I, when our English friends, they simply took sight of that Zionist organization and offered them 6,000 miles of land to settle the Jews population in Uganda, which they immediately refused. And then it was the second stint that in November 2017, they offered them that, okay, we will settle you in Palestine. And the irony of it was that in 1922, the same demand of the Zionist organization that was made a part of mandate of the League of Nations. From here, the story, serious story starts. And then the Hitler's policy, whatever, during the War II, that simply caused them to leave their homeland in Germany, Austria, and all around, and they all traveled to Palestine. Whatever the situation took, that's a long story. The history pages are depleted with them. But the really, one is shocked to hear that suddenly in 1947, they simply put up a plan and the UN forwarded them the plan of partition of the Palestinian lands. And in 1948, they simply announced it without any formal permission or whatever policy or any document. They simply announced it in May 1948, and that. But then the continued in between the 1948-49 war came. Then it jumped into 1967 6 days war. That's okay. Basically, that was a fatal blow to the Muslim cause there in Palestinian. That was with the aid of American friends, whatever it is. And then
I'll stop you here, sir, for a while. We are joined by Mr. Ahmed Zaki, who's joining us from Somalia on Skype. Ahmed Zaki, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ahmed Zaki, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Is it clear?
Zaki, we are seeing, as you are aware, we are talking about the act of genocide in Gaza, and we have seen many violations of the international law. Even the wars have some law according to the international standards or international definitions. What are the consequences of violation of these laws as per UN Charter?
Thank you for having me. As you know, that since the war of Gaza started, the crisis like mounted day by day. On the other hand, the violation of international law become like a habitual action that happens like every minute in Gaza. And it's not only the first time that Israel have skipped, Israel have committed the international war crimes. But in this time, they have seen that there is 100% support from the UN Security Council, 3 members of USA, UK and France, and they are deliberately supporting while they are violating international humanitarian rights and the protection of the civilian. What they are doing is that now they are committing a genocide, that by killing babies and women and the elderly people, the people who have no clue about the war and they don't have anything to do with the Hamas, and they are doing the collective banishment, and that is what we call the international, in terms of international law, that is what we call a genocide.
Ahmed, I'm coming back to you after a while. Mr. Inam, there is severe hunger crisis. Let's talk about it, what we have in hand today. So as I was telling in the beginning of the show, not only the food is not allowed in, but whatever existing food was there, these facilities, the bakeries, the small shops, the tuck shops have been hit by bombs and missiles, making sure that nothing eatable is left in the city. What are we heading towards?
Yeah, that's a real tragedy with the humanity, I tell you. It's not a matter of that only the Palestinians. Maybe there may be tens of tourists of the different nationalities from the different nations. But all the humanity is suffering, especially the Palestinian families, children and the women. They are basically the most suffering because there were only 11 bakeries in the Gaza. And all they hit it, the Israeli forces hit them and targeted them and made sure that there is no floor left and there is no workable condition left in there. And that was the real problem. And the second was as you have mentioned about the hospitals, there are only 36 hospitals in that area, in the Gaza, that area where the war is on. And in those 36, 22, you have mentioned it in your opening introduction, that 22 have been completely destroyed. And they have encircled the rest of them. There is no power, there is no electricity, there is no water, no operation theatre is working there. The staff has been taken as hostages. And in the Shafa hospital, they have done a very, a tragedy is that they have taken away yesterday 200 civilians, simply labeling them as they are the Hamas people. They are no Hamas people. maybe, but they are human beings. At least there is no law. Even their own parliament, in their own politics, there are so many voices, different voices, they are coming up that, okay, this is not the desired pattern of the war, whatever it is going on. All the families are being targeted.
Let me go back to Ahmed Zaki. Ahmed, as you might have heard, my guest in the studio has mentioned how in the garb of Hamas, innocent people are being targeted. But what exactly have IDF accomplished against Hamas? Can you tell us a bit more detail about what has been actually accomplished on ground against Hamas?
As you know, that the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, he declared a war in 8th of October. He said that we are in a war, we are in a state of war against Hamas. And he said that the war will be long and we will win this. According to their explanation of the military headquarters of Israel, they are saying we are targeting to eliminate the basis of Hamas. So far, there is no evidence that they have demolished any sort of Hamas base, which they show on the international media. There is no any person they capture from Hamas members or Hamas leaders. There is no one person they can name or show its pictures that they have killed in Hamas. On the other hand, they said that we have achieved it by killing 36 Hamas fighters. So imagine 11,000 people in Gaza have been killed, equivalent with just only 36 members of Hamas. When you see on the other side, their own military operation members have died. More than 56 people died after when they start the operation, Israeli military, which means the death number of the military is more than the death number of the Hamas members. So you can imagine the difference from there. On the other hand, there is no achievement other than that demolition, the civilian public interest, like the hospitals, schools, refugee camps, like that is a total genocide. So you will understand from the perspective of what they are telling to the media and what they are doing is completely opposite.
Coming back to you, Mr. Anam, since most of the viewers of this program were not even born when the Arab-Israel war was fought, and you were just referring to it, help the viewers to understand why Arab-Israel war became a deciding point in the history of Palestine, and why after that Muslim countries have never been able to do anything collectively or even to think on these lines against Israel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Syed. The history starts from even before 4,000 years, or with Nabi Abraham landed there. It's coming there. But that country is being owned by all living in harmony. Different people try to conquer it. The Ottomans were the last rulers there in that country. Before that, there were Romans. Before that, there were pagans. So everybody has some share there. And the Christianity and the Judaism and the Islamic religion, all they are coming side by side and without any problem. Jerusalem was their center. Jerusalem city that has been ruined, 100 times it has been ruined, but 100 times it was rebuilt. Even then it survived. Sometimes it was removed from the history that okay, it will not survive. But again it developed. There because in Quran it's a very clear indication.
But I was discussing about that Arab-Israel war that took place in 60s. That became a turning point for the history.
Coming to that point, that basically Israel wanted that their own worship, the old place of Hekel, you can first and second and whatever it was, their own worship. They wanted that place in Jerusalem. But the Muslims has the same sentiments, and the Christians have the same sentiments with that city. and started with them. And when I talked about the Zionist movement, basically that was a movement which encouraged the Jews of the whole world to come together there. You know, the Judaism, sir, it is known as the nationality, not only the religion now.
Yeah, that
Yeah, basically they wanted Israel, but this is not the way. When the international forces, when the UN agencies, when the English governments, they have allowed you that, okay, you bifurcate it and live peacefully. But they had never come to that. In 2005, in 2003, they built all these Gaza developments and the Jews were settled it. But in 2005, they simply told the people that we are leaving it. On the record, on the papers, on the books, it is on record that they are leaving Gaza in 2005.
Gaza and they came
but
back.
they didn't leave it. That's the problem. They didn't leave it. From here the crisis cropped
Let me
up.
bring Ahmed Zaki back into the conversation. Zaki, do you believe that this the Arab-Israel war in 60s became actually the reason why the Palestine never took support from the neighboring Arab nations ever again? I mean, they were never again actively involved into this conflict.
When we go back to the history of the Middle East, that since the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, there was a small status of Arab nations came after when British was leaving the Middle East, and there was a conflict of interest between Jordan, Egypt, and Syria, which was the strongest nations on that area. On that time, Jordan was leading the military operations, which was trained and equipped by the British Royal Military, and they were the only capable military installation in the Middle East who can take back on the Palestinian land. The major problem that they have, the major setback that they have was on that time, none of them was willing to give Palestinians their land. Everyone want to take by themselves as the Holy Land, and they want to get the respect of the leaders of the Holy Land. So Jordan want to have by themselves, Syria want to get by themselves, and Egypt want to get by themselves. So Israel get a chance that they were the local residents over there, those who were fighting, and those who came back from Europe since the Second World War. And they were already well equipped, given by the British Army, and they were fighting on the ground. They know the land. They know better than other Arabs who were coming from Egypt or from Jordan or from Syria. They never employed as military members in Palestinian people. Palestinian people realized very late that they need to defend themselves in the form of PLO. And that was extremely very late when Israel get very strong, and they already established their military bases in Israel, in Palestinian land. They already get latest weapons from British and UK and France. And that are the three major powers are still behind the power of military power of Israel. On the other hand, Arabs never agreed one day till today the support of Palestinian 100%. Everyone want to support by the conditions, by terms and conditions of themselves. So that is the weakness that they are still facing. The Palestinians, they never get one time in same boat. Jordan, Syria.
Point taken, Zaki. I'll get back to you on this. Last thing that I need to ask you, Namshab, do you see an end game in this war? Do you think Israel actually have an end game for this all war that is happening?
In my humble opinion, I don't see any end to it, because both Israel and the Hamas, both they have no clear goals in their minds that what they are doing, what they are wanting. And the other countries, Muslim countries, as Mr. Zaki has explained, other countries are not interested in solving this problem because they don't want to oppose Israel, because they get all the technology from there via America or via European countries. And while the American and European countries are standing by Israel, so these people have their own differences.
We are running out of time here, Namshab. Thank you very much for being guest in our show. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with second segment of the program. Stay with us.
security analyst, expert.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm now joined by Syed Muhammad Ali, who is a security analyst and an expert and has been on our show many times. Ali, I welcome you to my show once again, and it's always an absolute pleasure to have you here. Give us a quick stock take on what is happening in Gaza and how do you see these developments?
Thank you for having me, Ashwat. The war is afoot on 4 fronts. There is a diplomatic front, there is an information front, there is a military front, and there is an economic front, very quickly. And obviously the war is waging differently and is at different stages in all these 4 fronts. So let's begin at home, the information front. And it is perhaps the most interesting front and the least talked about one. Because if you quickly compare it with Ukraine war, despite huge Western diplomatic, media, political and military support for Israel, I think Hamas has done quite well in the information domain. If you quickly compare it with the Ukraine conflict, there is hardly any narrative in the social media, electronic and print media, even academic journals coming from the Russian perspective. And the West has completely dominated the information domain in the Ukraine war. But here,
and the popular narrative too.
But here, it's very interesting and fascinating study in warfare that a non-state actor, it's not a state war, it's not an interstate war. Hamas is an organization, has successfully won the concern, the sympathy, and somewhat support of the international community at the societal level, in information, of the journalists, quite remarkably. And I think it's quite an achievement. Coming quickly to the economic domain, which is also not talked about, and that is something which makes me stress the point that this war and its cost will be very long term, because the manner in which Israel has conducted its military operation has demolished the entire economic structure of Gaza, not just the physical structure. According to latest reports, more than 200,000 buildings have been damaged. 40,000 buildings are completely destroyed. So whatever the Gazans did, whatever the Palestinians did for a living, for surviving, so when people talk about providing them relief, I think there is not enough attention given to the nature of damage. That obviously they need water, they need food, they need medicine, but that is something that will last for a few days only. Their entire economy has been razed to the ground. Their jobs, their factories, their shops, their bakeries, everything is gone. So, and unfortunately, I don't see any commitment coming from any organization or state to rebuild it, to offer a commitment. There is sympathy, there is support, there is grievance, there is concern. But I think it is absent, it's conspicuous by absence that no international commitment or effort towards rebuilding this. This is very concerning. And quickly coming to the military side, I think the nature of conflict is also quite asymmetrical. While operations by the Israeli Air Force and land forces and also partly naval forces are ongoing with the support of its satellites and a deterrence provided by its allies in the region. But basically, Hamas is relying heavily on asymmetrical warfare, urban warfare, and basically ambushing the Israeli forces. So I see Hamas preferring a way of war which is similar to how we saw in Syria, in Afghanistan, and which makes me think that they are also, like the Israelis, prepared for a long war. And we will not see decisive battles. We will see it a long conflict.
Ali, you were talking about post-war peace building process a while ago. if I talk about in the language of academia. And as of now, when we speak, the diplomatic world is not clear whether they are looking for a ceasefire or not. The word ceasefire has been entirely missing in the entire diplomatic discourse led by the United States and pursued by the rest of the West. They're rather calling it a humanitarian pause. Why such a stress on the terminology of ceasefire being avoided?
I think it's very significant, and it totally depends upon the contrasting war objectives of the two antagonists. When you look at Hamas, basically, I think their objectives were threefold, and they have partly achieved those objectives. The first objective was diplomatic, to revive the significance of the Palestine issue, which was somewhat eclipsed by the Ukraine conflict and other so many issues. And they have achieved it at great cost, obviously. The second objective was that I think they had a strategic interest in disrupting the normalization process between Arab countries and Israel. And they felt that if it concludes leading to the formal recognition of Israel, then the Palestinian issue will be buried forever. So they have successfully disrupted this temporarily. The third objective is, and here their interest partly converges with those emerging and resurgent great powers which do not want this entire Middle East region to become of a sphere of US influence. And I'll just partly refer to the corridor which was announced on the sidelines of the
humanitarian corridor.
No, the strategic corridor which was announced on the sidelines of the G20 held in India, in which there was a US supported idea of a parallel and alternative corridor from India to Middle East to Israel to Europe, to attract greater international trade towards this corridor and away from the BRI project. So I see a geo-economic context, an incentive for great powers to sort of benefit from this as well. So these are the three contexts which help us explain and understand the objectives of Hamas. When you look at Israel, it is a continuation of their 75-year-old policy, which is based on four things. Number one, kill Palestinians, demolish their houses and structures, occupy more land, and number four, create more Jewish settlements. So it's a continuation. They have used all conflicts for this particular purpose.
Ali, you were talking about the information realm of this war, and you are of the view that Hamas somehow has done a great job in at least this realm. Now, some of my guests in the show, since this is back-to-back fourth show that we are doing exclusively on this one subject, some of the critics from the West have said this war to be one of the worst PR disasters for the United States, despite the fact that there's an all-out support from all international media outlets. Would you agree with this argument here?
I think I agree with it partly for three reasons. Quickly, I think number one, the amount of political, diplomatic, economic and military support that the US in particular and the Western powers in general provided Israel in this conflict has raised significant concern in the Muslim world in particular, but also the constant images that some of the international and Arab media is sharing on electronic, print and social media about the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza has, I think, invoked the world's sentiments, conscience and emotions beyond nation states, beyond religious lines, beyond geography, and which has made this disproportionate support for Israel's war on Gaza politically costly for most of the Western powers, including the US, including Germany, including UK, including Canada, and some of the other countries as well. And that is reflected in the somewhat nuanced recalibration of the stance and narrative, and sort of an afterthought, like emphasis that, you know, the targeting should not be non-discriminatory, and you know, the hospital should not be bombed and things like that. But obviously it seems more of an afterthought based on the political cost which has sort of been raised due to the information.
Let's bring Ahmed Zaki back into the conversation, who is joining me over the phone. Zaki, will Israel be able to eliminate Hamas the way this war is going on?
I don't think that will not be the case, because Israel is using the reason or the excuse that they are saying that we want to eliminate Hamas, but actually their intention is something different, because the actions are more louder than the words that they are telling to the international media. As we see, their intentions have been already for a long time, have published by a lot of research papers. There are a lot of books have been written that Israel want to eliminate Palestinian civilian from a strip of Gaza. They want to take the land, and they want to alienate all the Palestinians, and that is their main agenda. So can they eliminate Hamas? That they were expecting that the Egypt will open the border. A lot of Palestinian refugees will go to the Sinai region of Egypt, and Israel will occupy the land with a very, very less number of Palestinians, and then they will rebuild Gaza, and it will be like occupied land of Palestinian, and there will be a new settlers of Jews. But unfortunately, on the other side of the Egypt, they understood the case and they didn't allow anyone to come out. So Israel have only one option remain. They should have to eliminate and kill every member of Palestinian people in front of the international media. And if they successfully complete that, maybe Hamas will be damaged, but it will not be eliminated.
Zaki, a while ago I was discussing with Ali, who's my guest in the studio, about the terminology ceasefire that has been completely ignored in the international diplomatic discourse. We are seeing the West clearly shy of using the terminology ceasefire. You must have heard what Ali said. What is your opinion with regards to the ceasefire that the West is shying away from?
One thing is very clear, that since the beginning of this war, there was 3 countries and their administrations, they were interested in this sort of war. And it was not the popular support from their public opinion, even if they are claiming that we are a democratic countries. There are a lot of people came protest in Paris, London, and in Washington. And they were only demanding one thing: ceasefire and humanitarian corridors. Unfortunately, even the public opinion failed that Western leaders to even call one time that it's need that there should have to be a ceasefire. And why it is that? It's because of 2 reasons. Now you can understand the Western world have been dominated by the multinational corporations, those who are benefiting from this war, especially those who are manufacturing weapons and animation. And they don't want this war to be in nearby even the future, that it will take minimum 3 to 4 months more. And that's where they are demonstrating their new weapons so that they can get a lot of sales from Ukraine and from Israel. So Israel is now at one point that they can sell a lot of animation and weapons through their Israel lobbies in USA, in France, and in UK.
Zaki, will get back to you with the next question. Ali, how do you see the Middle East at large being affected? There are certainly shockwaves going to the entire of Middle East. All the Arab nations are quite concerned. I would rather say even Iran is quite concerned about the developments that are happening. At large, how do you see Middle East getting affected from this catastrophe?
I think it's a very significant cataclysmic conflict, perhaps a decisive conflict. Let me share with you one of the statements that Putin made in the first few days when it started, that this conflict will eventually lead to the emergence of a multipolar world order. So this conflict should not be seen only from the lens of the military or the combat operations going on or the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in the streets of Gaza alone. We are living in an integrated, interdependent, globalized world, increasingly thanks to media and information domain. So how it will affect the world? Let's quickly look at the four domains. I think it has accelerated the polarization of the world order. It has deepened the distrust between the status quo superpower, the US, and the emerging and the resurgent China and Russia. However, China, in the context of the recent summit meeting between President Xi and President Biden, it seems is careful not to waste its power too soon. So it is careful not to get involved in this conflict in any manner. However, you see the streets of the Western civilization getting quite polarized and divided. On one side is the reflection of an increasingly costly narrative, which is state supported, which is sympathetic to Israel, but it is being contested on the streets, in the universities, on media, in terms of huge million people rallies in which people are making the support, the disproportionate support for Israel politically and economically costly for their governments. You are seeing incidents, gory incidents of 6-year-old Palestinian kids stabbed to death 26 times in Chicago. You see a Pakistani doctor being murdered. You see anti-Semitism rising and Islamophobia rising at the same time. So this ideological and social polarization of the Western civilization is also a huge cost that the Western powers are paying and will continue to pay in future, which will hugely harm their own political and economic security in the long run. So it's not just the support of Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to demolish some neighborhoods and resettle some new Jewish settlements. It is going to cost the West. Perhaps the West is not recognizing and realizing the nature, extent, and long-term cost that it will have to pay, in not just in terms of instability and ideological polarization, but perhaps the biggest loss of trust in the human values, in the Western values, in the Western-led world order as well.
Zaki, last 1 minute in the show, tell us how do you see the effect in the larger picture of the Middle East, being an expert of Middle East?
Thank you so much. It will have a far deep consequences on this war in terms of a political influence of the Arab nations. Their civil organizations and their populations see their leader as a puppet, and it will be very difficult to convince again your own people. There will be an uprising again. That shows that the most of the Arab leaders, and including the other Muslim countries in neighboring countries, it seems that they fail to protect the cost of Palestinians, which most of the great leaders of Middle East, they were showing themselves as the protectors of Palestinians. But when it came to the elimination of the civilian population of Gaza, they failed to protect the civilian of Gaza. Even they failed to convince the Western friends that the ceasefire should have to be implemented, and that shows it will have deep consequences. And on the other hand, the hate of the American interests in the region and the Western interests is going to be compromised, and that there will be a lot of targets of Western influence.
Thank you, Ahmad Zaki, for being guest in our show. Thank you very much, Syed Muhammad Ali, for coming to our show. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last, I'll only say that back in 1992, the United Nations could not stop what happened in Bosnia. It could not secure the people under the watch of the United Nations. Back in 1994, it could not stop the manslaughter, the genocide of 1 million Rwandans. And whatever was done afterwards is only history. This is the time for United Nations to act, not to fly their flag on the half-mast. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.